Hello, and here we are, episode 52. Wow, 52. That's a lot of episodes. And we've done it mainly with quite a lot of plain speaking, as Willie likes to call it, and no psychobabble. Well, just a bit perhaps, every now and again. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about talking. And I think I remember something from The Big Bang when she says to Sheldon, "Oh my good grief, we're gonna jibber jabber about jibber jabber." And that's kind of the same thing to a certain extent, because it's what it sounds like to the other person listening, isn't it? Maybe. Let's introduce ourselves then, shall we? Let's start with Tanys.
I'm Tanys Coughlan. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, and I help people on their spiritual path, working through their shadow stuff and helping them clear their energy.
Jennifer.
I am also from Ottawa, or just north of it, and I am a registered psychotherapist, certified Canadian counselor, intuitive life coach, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you all today.
Hi.
I'm Mary Corbett. I'm from Cork in Ireland, and I'm have here for fun. I coach, yes, all sorts of people, and I just love to hear people and help make their life better.
Willie.
Hi there, I'm Willie Nicol. I'm based in the Costerdale Troon in South Ayrshire in Scotland. I'm a former police officer and corporate security manager, now a personal development coach. And I help predominantly men, sorry ladies, I help men predominantly who feel lost or stressed or stuck to get their life back on track and rediscover their mojo.
Well, they need a lot of help. Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela, and I'm a little bit east of Willie, so not quite in the sunshine, but I'm in Hamilton in Scotland, and I'm a kinesiologist and a coach, and I help my clients work through whatever's going on for them, using their body's own wisdom to clear the problems and help them get back to balance and being what they and who they want to be.
Oh my goodness, that's a good one. That's a new one. I like that. And I'm Leslie Marsh. And apart from being the clown of the group most of the time, I do some work on occasions. And I work with people who are looking to discover their culture of nurture in their space of self and work, and looking at businesses as an organism, not just an organization. So there's a lot of room there for psychobabble, isn't there? So let's see. Psychobubbly babble. When do we hear it? When do we like it? When do we not like it? I'm going to start with you, Willie, since you kicked this one off.
Yes, well, we just call it psychobabble, just babble. When I was a police officer before that, I was a law student, and I deduced that the laws were written by lawyers to be interpreted and understood by lawyers and no one else. So it was a monopoly. Lawyers, judges, politicians, that was it, right? Same thing happened into business. There's a lot of babble, psychobabble at business. Let's run this up the flagpole and see how it flies. Let's have some blue sky thinking and all that kind of jargon. What does it mean? So I'm kind of known as a common sense guy. I like to keep things simple, and I absolutely abhor jargon and psychobabble, coaching mumbo jumbo, whatever, which I have encountered in the coaching environment, which I've been in for 6 years. And it kind of upsets me because I think it's a substitute for actual skill. Instead, we use the royal we coaches can use the jargon to confuse people, and it's not a good look. I don't subscribe to it, and it's one of my pet hates.
Oh, Angela.
So let's touch base once we've got all of our ducks in a row and use as many TLAs as we could possibly come up with. TLA is my favorite TLA, which is a three-letter acronym. And it is that way, Willie, exactly. Everybody that you talk to who is an expert in their field has to consciously stop to think, am what I saying, does what I say make sense and is it landing with the lay person for other people to understand me? And I guess it's that way as well as we all have our own filters on what we hear. And I think that can be quite a key aspect. But if you're using psychobabble and management speak and TLAs all over the place, there's a bigger chance that whoever you're talking to isn't going to get your true meaning behind what you're trying to get across. And that then just breaks down communication for all of us. Never mind whether it's a therapist or a coach or whoever it is that's working with you to help you feel better. But it's any conversation and communication. I think it's always key, regardless of the communication and who's trying to communicate. We're talking for a reason and we're communicating for a reason. And if the other person doesn't have the decoder ring to translate you, it can be a bit problematic.
Jennifer, what do you reckon?
Yeah, well, it's interesting when we talk about psychobabble because I see it from two sides of the coin, right? On one end, there's the professional who is using the terminology that maybe the client or, isn't quite understanding. But then on the other end, there's also people who use psychological terms inappropriately to classify or define. And that's also really damaging and dangerous. And so I think that, we've kind of got both sides of the spectrum here that are important to look at because, as a professional, and, I'll talk about, the nervous system and things like that with clients. And I can say, sympathetic and dorsal and the ventral vagal, but then I'll also say social engagement when we're connected, the way that we are with each other. If we feel like we're in that freeze state, that's what this is. If we feel like we need to fight or run away from something, that's what this is. And so I think that there is a place for the appropriate kind of terminology, but to be able to make it engaging and have people understand and be able to actually use what we have to offer, we have to make it so that it's easily accessible and understandable across the board. And being really mindful about how we're using terms and things like that is going to really impact our message and our ability to help, which is what we're all here to do.
Like Jennifer is saying, it's about using the language of the client as well as using the knowledge that's behind that. Mary, you will do that a lot, yeah?
I do that a lot, and I come at it from a slightly different perspective because one of the things, and Willie referred to it earlier, the lawyers had their speak. Every profession, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's an electrician, a plasterer, or a plumber, or a banker. We all have our own languages, and part of it is a way of identifying with our group. We speak a common language. So there's a way in which what others will call psychobabble, those of us within the professions where we are looking at psychological issues, that's just us differentiating ourselves and our language. That's ours. They're our people. We know what we're talking about. So I think there's a lot of stuff about how we deal as being part of that, identify as being a member of a profession or a group that comes with having a common language. But equally, it's when we take it from the profession out to everybody else, how much of it transfers and how does it transfer and how do we use it and what is our intention behind it? Because, and I think Jennifer really refers to it, using psychological terms which impact on people's mental well-being incorrectly and labeling people with psychological psychobabble incorrectly is so hugely potentially damaging. I think of all the professions, and yeah, I might have a bias in this one, psychobabble is particularly dangerous. So I think we have a huge ethical thing of saying, no, 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 speak in the language of the client always. And always clarify. Do you understand? And check that you have that common and a shared understanding every time. Sorry, I get my high horse on this one.
I think though, maybe
Listen,
there could be the where uh, let's say as a police officer, I could talk to police officers and police speak, right? That's fine because it's quicker, it's more
It
effective,
is
more
quicker.
efficient, right?
Yep.
But talking out with that environment, I would probably phrase myself differently. What annoys me is like some lawyers. I never want to be a lawyer. I don't want to study them, right? Where it's a deliberate attempt to create a closed shop, right? It's you don't have to look at, I don't know, court appearances or politicians, another bugbear of mine, where it's all obfuscation and diversion and deflection, right? Using a lot of big words and phrases and all that kind of thing. You're shouting at the television. Just answer the question, please. I had to stop myself using an expletive there. Just answer the question. And I'm sure they're trained. They go to a training school how not to answer a question, right? So they either obfuscate things or they try and baffle you or exert their superiority or alleged superiority. What do you know? You're just a whatever it is. I'm the expert. Well, whenever that happens, I have to question it and say, keep it simple, stupid, because communication is key. And if the person to whom you're communicating is not getting the message, you're just all wasting your time. And well, I mean, I've done it in the past where you nod, smile and nod, haven't a clue, and you think, I'm not arguing the toss with this idiot. Right? So you can tell I'm quite a bit like Mary. I'm quite het up about this. It's unpleasant. It's impolite. It's demeaning. It's patronising, and all of these words. Anyone who comes to me and says, "Here's how it is," Leslie will understand this. It is what it says in the tin. It does what it says in the tin, right? And you go, understand that, brilliant. And away you go, till you're quite happy. If that communication doesn't land because of psychobabble or mumble jumble, whatever, no one's happy, no one gets what they want, no results are obtained, and I'm not talking to that idiot again. So, quick, apart from being unpleasant, it's critical that the language used obtains the desired effect, the desired result.
I love that word, obfuscation. Brilliant. It's a really good word. But the thing with obfuscation is that there's no transparency there. And sometimes transparency is not what's needed. Tannis, transparency in the what would be deemed occult, which actually just means hidden, because we have occult blood in medicine, which means that you can't see the blood, it's not obvious, but it's there. So how occult came to have this cachet of things so very nice, shall we say. It's made a mark, hasn't it?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about having shared understanding about this kind of stuff, that's key, right? So I think that for me anyway, when I talk to clients, I try to bring the energy of all of that stuff down to, okay, so this is what it's actually doing, right? You know, you've got an aura, you know that the earth vibrates, like we all know that there's scientific evidence of that. And so you create an electromagnetic field. So like you can change how you speak about the occult stuff to something that is a little bit more down to earth. I think that's something that I certainly try to do. I could talk all in, dimensions and all of that and be all like that. But really, I mean, let's bring the magic part down to everyday use and bring that into the mainstream so that people actually understand it and can actually benefit from using the energetic ways of working through life. I think shared understanding is also about checking in with the other person, right? Because sometimes when we're part of a group, we don't realize that we're doing it. So does that make sense? Like saying, does that make sense to you? Like, what is that working for you? What is it that you're getting from that conversation? Or circling around and saying, so in my classes, I'll often say, okay, so one thing that you got from this class, and I'll ask everybody one thing that they got from the class, or what stood out for you, right? Because it does help to bring that shared understanding forward, and that's really key. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about not using psychobabble, is creating that shared understanding. And when I look at this from the organizational perspective, as I'm an HR consultant as well, it's when somebody starts at a job and they're going through that whole onboarding process, there is that like assimilation process where you actually have to learn the babble, the psychobabble that goes along with that, right? It's part of that socialization piece when you join an organization. It's you're learning. Somebody always calls this whatever, or somebody has a pet name for photocopier. Did you talk to, have you gone to see Matilda yet? And it's the photocopier, right? And you don't know what that means. So you end up finding out those things, as you go. That's part of the socialization process. That's all the shared understanding. And I agree with Mary when you talk about it helps you to feel part of something, organization, or part of a group of people. So whether you're talking about the occult language, or spiritual languages, or you're talking about office language, you're really using it as a way to connect with others, to be part of community, because that's what we're, community people. We're very social people, and we want to have that social connection with others. So,
and it's how it makes someone feel as well.
Yeah.
There was a particular incident when I was training, and because we were in a section that was kind of away from the main drag of the veterinary hospital, we used to get sent up to the veterinary hospital to see the usual stuff. And there was a particular orthopedic surgeon there who was well known for doing this. Unfortunately for him, I was in his theatre that day. And he liked to bully the young trainees by using all the big words. And he looked at me at one point and he said something about an osteotome. And I looked at him and I said, "Look, mate, if you want a chisel, just ask for one, all right?" And his face, because nobody spoke to him like that. And his face was just a picture. And I'm, like, I don't work for you. I don't care. You're supposed to be teaching me. You're not supposed to be patronizing me. So give over with the jargon and just tell me what you want. I'll learn the big names for it later. But what he didn't realize was I knew exactly what an osteotome was and what it was used for. He was lucky I didn't use it on him.
Then I would have had to come to arrest you.
Oh, no. I'd be away by that time, Willie.
But
There'd be
isn't
a
it
few people covering
interesting?
for me.
So it's just as Willie was saying that the lawyer speak was written for lawyers. It is that power dynamic that
Yeah.
some people have. I know this. This is my field. This is my speciality, and I'm going to do everything to belittle and make you feel small.
Mm.
And that's not where you really want to be in a healthy conversation for anybody. And then to add on to something that Tanys was saying about that checking in and making sure people understand, we also then need to think about from a cultural perspective what that looks like. Because there are many cultures who are trained to just nod and say yes, because the fact that they then come and say, I don't understand, can be really, really detrimental to them. So it's about how we then ask those questions. So you might find that a lot of coaches, and actually we use these as techniques as well, not just for the cultural aspect, we get people to replay what we've said to them, or we get people to say something in a different way so that we can understand, or we replay back to people, is this what you meant? So that there's absolutely no potential for lost in translation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the culture of the aspect of the training and the embedding of the training, most of the time it's got a lot to do with they were taught that way. So that's how they teach other people, but they kind of start to enjoy it after a while. It's almost a bit like Stockholm syndrome situation.
This is the way it was done in my day, so this is how
Yeah.
you're going to learn.
Yeah. I mean, how many times I don't tell you how many times I've had one person particularly say, "I've stood behind this table for the last 20 years and I'm not doing it any differently now." Excuse me?
I don't know.
Yeah.
As a
We're not
teacher, I
using
think
ether anymore.
as a teacher, I really feel like teachers should always be learning. We're not stagnant in their knowledge, like that statement would indicate.
But this is
You
true
know.
though. All the things that we do, all of us in our different ways, we have a parallel line that goes through. We're all here to help people and to help ourselves because we've got to work on ourselves in order to help other people as well, because we've got to learn how to do it. So there's no shame in that and saying, "Oh, well, I'm still learning," you know. So I'm waiting for you to teach me almost. And we will learn so many different things from our clients, particularly if we let them speak their language and then say, "Do you?" I know what I think it means, but why, if I was to go and say that to you in another time, how would it make you feel? Would it be something you'd be happy with? No. I mean, my boss used to say that, I was so rude. How rude could I be? I was working in the southeast of England at the time.
I'm guessing that was to you a red rag to a bull of, let me see how much more rude I can be. Yeah.
No, I just said to them that where I come from, if they don't put you in hospital on a Saturday night, they don't love you. So, I was being quite kind to him, really. But yeah, so it was only when his son ended up in hospital one night, he came back into the surgery the next day. He said, "I saw you last night," and I was like, Where did you see me?" Because I was in the flat. Uh, uh, oh, what's going on? And he'd gone into the hospital, and there was a nurse there from Coatbridge, and he said, "I understand it now. It's a cultural thing. It's
Yes.
not just you. You're not just being rude. It's a cultural thing." I was like, yeah, welcome to the club. Now you know what culture is. And they're all different.
And I
Is
think that's
it?
why it's so important to meet people where they're at.
Hmm.
Right? Like we talk about psychoeducation in the field and the importance of educating clients on understanding some of the dynamics that happen. And so we do get to a place where sometimes we do have to use terms, but I love to be able to use examples and metaphors that meet the client where they're at. If I'm talking to a teacher, I'm going to use a teaching example. If I'm talking to, I had one client who was a director. We're talking about movie making and movies as an example of a way to navigate it, right? And so, to what Mary had said early and what so many of you have talked about is really meeting the client where they're at. We can do the psychoeducation, we can use the understanding, and we don't have to use the terminology that is isolating or limiting. We can use it and adapt it to whatever the client, wherever they're at, and into the language that really resonates for them.
Well, and I
And I
think like Leslie does a lot, right? We can do a lot of communication through telling stories of our own stuff, and that really helps people to connect with us in a more authentic way. You know, if I know that I'll go on about stories in my classes and stuff because I'm sharing my experience, which helps to create that shared understanding, right? That we're all looking for. So storytelling can be a great way to take out some of the psychobabble because you're telling it how you experienced it as opposed to how you're supposed to talk about it in
Most
whatever.
But I
definitely.
think there's a little bit of a challenge for some coaches. I hope I'm not one of them. I hope I've never been guilty of this. But because we're all encouraged to do uh, content on various social media, it's very easy when you're doing it in the abstract writing that the psychobabble can kick in because it's yours, it's your language. It is the language you speak because you've learned it. It's really it's normal for you that it's very easy when we're doing anything that is going out there to the world without a very specific client being in front of us, that it's very easy that with the psychobabble and the terminology and our little language that we use and how we structure things and the shortcuts we take just creep in. So I think we do have to have a huge sensitivity to it that every communication has to be, I think almost has to have that, if this client who is probably not too well educated is sitting in front of me, will they get it and will they understand it? I think we have to bring it down because otherwise I think we get so comfortable with the language of our profession and with that we use it almost unknown to ourselves. It's almost unconscious. It's an unconscious use of it rather than conscious. It's not that we're setting out to do psychobabble, but we just can't help ourselves sometimes. I'm
but
actually sitting here getting anxious. I've
but
done this.
is there an element though of people use the language to hide behind? It's a bit of a security blanket. It's a bit of a comfort blanket. And as Jennifer said, I think it's that point of we need to meet people where they're at. So we might have already done 16 courses and 12 certifications and whatever else. But if the person coming to us has never had any experience of working with a coach or working with a therapist or working with energy, It's very daunting. And even where we think, oh, well, that's really basic, it might not be basic enough. So it's about meeting them where they're at right now. And where they're at right now will not be where they're at tomorrow or where they were yesterday, because everybody is so unique and everyone's life is so unique that we've got to meet people where they're at in that moment. And Mary, I think you're off the hook. I don't think I've seen you do too much psychobabble.
I'm thinking that we're going to have to learn a whole new dictionary of psychobabble ourselves with the generations that are coming up and coming up into therapy, particularly because they speak a whole different language now. It's the same language, it's just kind of shortened. I mean, I think the
but
most
that's
the most
that's been
one
happening for years though, Leslie,
I
and
know, but
we've
it
been
suddenly
keeping
seems
up
to
with
have
it.
taken a jump. Maybe I just don't watch enough TiC or something like that. I don't know.
I think
It's that
my
anyway.
benefit, I have no idea, but my benefit of I've been working in youth work for 25 plus years. And so I do keep myself around the teenagers and still try and keep myself relevant from the perspective of understanding how they operate and how they work. And yeah, things are changing and things tweak and sometimes it'll go in fits and starts that you'll have a big change and then it'll calm down a bit, just like growing pains. But I think as long as we keep ourselves relevant and keep ourselves out there, and Mary, you were saying that the whole content creation thing, that can be an interesting challenge because we're trying to put across that we're educated and we understand what we're doing, but we're trying to speak to the potential clients, but we're trying to match the algorithms and do what the different software are looking for. So that's its own minefield of understanding nuances
Hmm.
and everything that goes with it. So yeah, it is a fun challenge, but I think that's just all part of life. And as we discussed as well, we need to keep learning and we need to keep keeping ourselves fresh. Otherwise, we will become that person that says, "Well, I've stood behind this desk for 20 years." And likewise, in my youth work, there are a number of members of the staff team in the voluntary organisation I work for who have been part of the organisation for 50 years. And they're now getting to that point that they're not looking to change. And the way you teach and talk to teenagers now is not the same as when I started 25 years ago. And it's definitely not how you talked to teenagers 50 years ago.
Hmm.
You know,
I'm
it's interesting
noticing.
as you're, oh, sorry,
Oh, on you go.
as you were talking about that, because one of the things I find with clients to be exceptionally helpful in this area is if they do use a term that I'm not familiar with or something that I'm not okay with, to say, hold on, can we go back a minute? Can you just explain to me what you mean by this? I'm not familiar with it. And it, by being open and vulnerable in that way, it holds space for the client to be able to go, hey, hold on, Jen. What was that? What was that you just said there? Or, I'm not really sure what that meant. Right. And with the check-ins and all, I think it's great to say, do you understand? But at the same time, to be able to say, how does that resonate for you? Like, is that settling in? Are you able to feel that? Is there something that's blocking it? Are you, if I said something that you don't understand, please let me know so that I can make sure that we're in flow, and really kind of just putting it out there, I think is also really, really important. And to allow ourselves to, as Mary said, we don't necessarily want to, but if we fall into it, we want to be able to catch that and honor it and go, you know what? I think I just did that. That might not, that might not be something you're familiar with. Let me back up a minute, and go into it, and explain it a little bit more. So I think that, we have that capacity to really hold space for that if we're willing to be vulnerable ourselves.
I think we need to
I
be
think
curious as
authentic,
well.
yeah, curious and authentic, I think,
Mhm.
Yeah.
really. Because you're right, if we can be authentic and say, okay, I don't quite understand, then it really does open it up for our clients. They feel more comfortable to be able to say, oh, she doesn't understand. Oh, so I get to explain it to her, right? And so
Mhm.
it kind of it's takes some of that power play that you were speaking about earlier, right? Takes that power play out of the conversation a little bit.
It shows and reminds them we're human too.
Mhm.
Yep.
I think you have to preface the conversation by saying that I'm going to be 100% open with you. I hope you'll be the same with me. honesty, trust, etc., etc. And if there's something you don't understand, please say so. Because you'll get an occasion you say, do you understand that? Oh, yeah, yeah. And you get a feeling. You just intuit. You didn't understand a bloody word of that, right? And you say, that is one of the foundations is, if you don't understand it, you have to tell me, put your hand up, whatever you want to do. Otherwise, you can't move forward. And I forget who said this. I have learned so much from clients, right? It's a two-way educational conversation, energy flow, whatever it is. And I use the word mojo in my little pitch because one of my first clients, I may have said this before, forgive me, was a bit lost, bit overwhelmed. And I just happened to say, apropos nothing, you've lost your mojo. And he said, that's exactly how I feel. And I thought maybe that was a God-inspired thing. I don't know what inspired me to say that. You've lost your mojo. From that moment on, we decided, let's go and find the guy's mojo. And we did. And it was absolutely brilliant because we got that connection, that understanding, that honesty and trust. Because if you don't have that, you're going to be struggling. Another thing that occurs to me is why would you use psychobabble or mumbo jumbo? Because you're not going to get many clients. If you get clients, they won't stay with you very long, and you won't get any positive referrals or reviews. So to me, it's just lunacy to use that. Yes, terminology in certain situations, policing, rates, health, whatever. Yeah, it can be very helpful, quicker, readily understandable. But I agree with Jennifer. You have to not get to their level, understand where they're at, and I go back to keep it as simple as possible without using big words. I like using big words like obfuscation, right? Just as a kind of piss take, because I like using humour in my coaching. And I will treat everything with a degree of levity when appropriate to keep things light. And another thing that I do, self-deprecation, I take the mickey out myself. So my nickname's the Techno Dinosaur. And I have a YouTube channel to prove it, which I do. Right? And that kind of lowers the bar, if you like. You think, oh, he's not omniscient, not a good word, omnipresent, etc., etc. He's just a regular guy
Did
who
you swallow a
understands what.
dictionary tonight?
No, I've always been this way.
All in the O's. He got stuck in the O section.
The only thing I was good at school was English, right, and grammar. Right. But if you do that and you get down to the level, well, he's just a general guy who knows a bit of stuff. I think he could help me. We're on the same wavelength. Let's go. And the joy is when you get to that level and you're on the same path, if you like, and then you jog along together. We tend not to hold hands right enough, but we jog along together, right? And we make progress together. Not me telling that person what to do or hitting them with a lot of jumbo, whatever it is. And that to me is the beauty of coaching. And I'm going to shut up now because I'm getting quite enthused.
Oh, we got to the E's. Oh,
Or was it othused?
you eased yourself in there. No, it's like I had a review from someone, and it was really interesting. She came to me via my husband. She was in training with NLP with my husband, which was why it really kind of made me think. And she was coming to one of the storytelling nights, and she wrote in the review, I was really worried and scared about what was going to happen because I didn't know. I thought, I really want to put that out there. And then there was the but. And then from there on, the but was, it was great. It was this, it was that, it was the other. And I really enjoyed it and I can't wait to do it again. And I thought, do you know what? That's a good point because that's where most people come from when they don't know what it is, exactly what you do. And we have difficulty sometimes explaining what it is that we do because it's subjective and it's experiential for the most part. We can tell people how we experience it, how we know other people have said they've experienced it, but we can never tell how they're going to experience it because our experience is not going to be theirs because we don't have their life memories or experiences. And that's something else that we could remember. But the curiosity part, well, I am rabidly curious. I am absolutely. I will bite the arse of any dictionary of any book that takes my fancy. I will get in there. And after being introduced to Audible books, I have started listening to some of the books that I've thought I'll get around to that. So while I'm in the garden, I'm listening to books on Toltec shamanism. And I love the idea from that about the domestication of the human being. And I think to myself, oh, hang on a minute. That's just taking it from way up there to where people would not really understand what's going on. I call it potty training. But the idea of domestication, it just fits because we domesticate animals and we domesticate this and we give them limitations and boundaries within which we prefer that they would communicate with us by doing what they're told and what they're expected to do. And so when we get this idea that as humans evolve, the domestication doesn't really fit anymore. But the other thing is that a lot of this stuff is coming up and around again as a new discovery. My goodness, nobody's ever thought of this before. I'm just going to give it a new name, Psychobabble, da da da, and we're going to introduce it, and everybody's going to come to me and get this done. When actually, it's centuries old. It's ancient stuff. I mean, the 7 Pillars of NLP is based on Ho'oponopono. And Toltec as well, some of the manifestation stuff that comes along from there, and how we look at energy. And reading Gabor Mate and Van der Kolk as well, and understanding the new word that I found from Nicol. Deep breath. Here's some psychobabble for you. Psychoneuroimmunology. It's all about your trauma and wounds that you have had, not even in this life, but in the life before, quite
So why
possibly.
use 5 letters when you can use 25?
Exactly. It's a bit like Gaelic. Why shove every piece of the alphabet into one word? It's because it's only a spoken language. It was never supposed to be written down. So we don't know how to spell things in Gaelic. So there's another bit of, we know this language, and it's like, it's about knowing the language. It's about being able to communicate, being able to understand what we're saying to each other. And how acceptable is it? Because there are going to be times when we're going to say something, it's going to go, oh, don't like that. Ooh. And I'm sure, Willie, you know yourself, that happens, that can happen quite a bit.
But, in today's environment, where you're kind of wary about saying anything, because my wife said to
You
me,
might get cancelled.
you might get
Yeah.
cancelled, you might get arrested, right, for saying the wrong thing. So I don't want to go down the free speech thing, because we're getting a wee bit off piste here, but language is very powerful, and the way you use it can be very powerful. So that psychobabble aside, is we have to be careful with the language you use, because it can impinge on people's feelings, their energy, whatever upset them. So it's like a, engaged brain before open mouth. I've not always been good at that, but we're back to what Jennifer's, the communication. You're meeting people at a level where the communication is two-way, where it's each side understands what the other's saying. Because I go back to, if that communication is faulty or it doesn't work, you're never going to get anywhere, right? So I've been guilty of not being a good communicator in the past. I try my best now to be a better communicator, but the bit about using inappropriate language, we've all done it, right? My language was terrible when I was a police officer, but that was because of the environment I was in, because everybody's language was terrible, right? My colleagues and the people we dealt with, that was that was like Swahili, right? It was like a whole different way of communicating, but we all understood it. But you couldn't take that out, put it somewhere else. So the importance of language, and not only just the language you use, the way we use it, the way we speak. So I could say something like, I could point and put a face on and say, and people would assume I was giving them a row. Or I could put a face and go, that is absolutely brilliant. You've done a marvellous job. Well done, you. Now, it's the same facial expression and the same gesture, but a totally different piece of information, right? So it's the language you use and the way we put it across is very important. And that's why I'm a big fan of NLP or Hoponopono, whatever it is, right? Not so much, but anyway.
I think it's also the way you're putting it across is the energy that you're putting into it. So, right, they call spells because it's, well, your words have energy, they have power to them. And so when we're talking to people, we have power in language. And I think that's where, your tone comes in and how you're saying it. Your tone is the energy that you're putting behind it. And so we do need to be conscious of the tone that we use with people as well. And that's where that condescending, somebody brought up condescending or, feel to conversations can come in. So when we're using a tone in that sense, you could say the same thing in a different tone and it could feel condescending because of the energy that's behind it, because the energy you create to send out is a spell, and it creates. We're creator beings, so we create with our words, and that's why they're called spells.
Willie and I were brought up in a time when people just shouted. There was no lower volume. It was always up at 10, and that was them being nice to you. Basically, once it passed 10 and they weren't being nice to you anymore, it was getting hit. Things flying through the air and ducking and learning how to stay out of places. But yeah, there
Another
are
example of why it's good that times change.
Well, yes, but not always changing because some of that still goes on. And it's something about learning about being curious outside of your environment because a lot of people think that that's absolutely normal and it's what they're familiar with. And we have to, as therapists, I think, also have to take that, and coaches have to take that into consideration. What is this person's familiarity zone? Not their comfort zone, because, you can be very uncomfortable even when it's familiar. That's why some people don't leave abusive relationships because it's all they know. They don't know anything else because perhaps they were brought up in one. So they expect that that's going to happen to them, and that energy attracts the energy of someone who's going to do that to them. And if they get someone who's not doing that to them, they think there's something wrong with them. What? Don't you like me? Why are you not hitting me? Why are you not being nasty to me or whatever? And it's a ridiculous kind of thing when you sit here in this kind of atmosphere and say that now. But actually, there are still people who are in those situations who don't know any different. So I'm thinking that as therapists and coaches and counselors, and Jennifer does it anyway, she actually says at the beginning that she's an intuitive coach. And we have to, all of us, we may not realize we don't, maybe that's psychobabble to somebody else. Intuition, excuse me, what's that got to do with science? Everything.
It's all energy.
It's all energy. All the things that you hear, it's all there. And we just put nice little labels like psychoneuroimmunology on it.
You like that one, don't you? Are you going to go and train in that now?
I am loving this word because it's actually what they're saying is, yes, we accept the holistic idea. We accept that there are things that happen in people's childhoods that become physical manifestations in later life. And because they don't communicate, because they don't know how, they don't know their type C personalities or type B personalities. We might go into
what
that
that even means.
Exactly. That's another psychobabble for you. But we might go into that idea in another session. We don't always understand how we are doing things, why we're doing things, and what we're doing things for. Language helps us with that. Training helps us with that. But it also depends on the trainer, how we are trained, and how we take that training and make it our own. How we take the psychobabble and we filtrate it through into normal everyday speak. And so if you're ever in a situation where you're not getting understanding what you're doing. Take a deep breath and say, what was that? What did you mean? So until next time, try and keep it clear and clean language. Sweary words are allowed because, they emphasize sometimes. I'm not going to tell you not to do that.